Hello, I am Janelle, and this is a discussion about female orgasmic disorder or FOD and why I believe that it's important to embrace sexual well being and pleasure as an alternative to diagnosis. This discussion is for vulva owners and everyone who loves them. Let's get into it. So, we are inundated by images in the media that communicate all sorts of ideas about sex and how female orgasm works or is supposed to look. Let's take a look at this scene from the movie Showgirls with Elizabeth Berkley and Cal McLaughlin. All right, so what's being communicated here? Penile vaginal heterosexual intercourse is being portrayed. It appears to be really fast and really furious. It looks like there is a change of pace towards the end, which we can only or deduce is orgasm. Um, Not exactly certain what all is being communicated, but the point for me is there's a lot happening and it's super confusing and unwholesome. So, this media representation and communications that are like this could leave vulva owners and those who love them believing that orgasmic experiences are fast, intense, goal-oriented, and a result of penile vaginal penetration, when the truth is most vulva owners require clitoral stimulation, not penile-vaginal intercourse, to experience orgasm. And even then, orgasmic experiences vary so widely from person to person and even within the same person that there is no objective measure of documenting when orgasm is occurring. We'll talk a bit more on this later. But with all of these possibilities, I think it's really valuable for us to express to vulva owners that in order to increase their sexual pleasure or sexual experiences, it's important to embrace more open-ended models of sexual experiences, sexual well-being and pleasure. But there's an elephant in the room, and that's capitalism. So there's no argument that here in the United States, we live in a capitalist society, and capitalism is a political and economic system where profitability is centered. And because profitability is the North Star in a capitalist society, it can be said that the primary motivation for many of our systems and institutions is money. This affects how we relate to each other on so many levels. The term medical industrial complex has emerged to describe the complex web of stakeholders, which include pharmaceutical companies, medical device manufacturers, insurance providers, hospitals, and healthcare providers that are deeply enmeshed and converge to collectively influence healthcare policies, research agendas, treatment protocols, patient care practices, and the marketing and advertising campaign that support these various initiatives and industries in a way that prioritizes profit over patient care and well-being. I believe healthcare providers at every touch point of the patient care experience must do the work to divest from the medical industrial complex and to put an end to over medicalization, unnecessary treatments, inflated healthcare costs, and disparities in access to care. So, if we're going to have any meaningful movement forward of vulva owners' sexual experiences away from the narrow focus of goal oriented sex, we've got to get the buy in of sex educators, researchers, influencers, and clinicians to name capitalism's influence on how we relate with ourselves and with each other, and to embrace instead a move away from the medicalization and pathologization of vulva owners' orgasmic experiences and replace that with a focus on sexual well being. You see, an environment where sexual well being flourishes is one where pleasure follows and maybe even orgasm. But moving the needle from orgasm as a goal to sexual well being is crucial. We'll dive more deeply into what sexual well being looks like in a bit. But for now, let's take a look at what is female orgasmic disorder. So, the DSM 5 defines female orgasmic disorder as reduced intensity, delay in frequency, and or absence of orgasm in vulva owners. These symptoms must persist for at least 6 months, and they may not be related to any other physical or relational problems. So let's break this down. The reduced intensity, delay, and infrequency indicate that it is possible for vulva owners to have the subjective experience of orgasm and still be diagnosed with FOD. And the reality is that if vulva owners are having any experience of orgasm that they consider to be pleasurable, this should be celebrated. Instead, the FOD diagnosis focuses on lack of an unnamed, unquantifiable, and imaginary normative orgasmic experience. According to Dr. Julia Hyman, the difficulties in studying orgasm include the lack of an objective measure of documenting when orgasm is occurring for those who are studying the neurophysiological aspects of orgasm, and an agreed upon subjective definition of orgasm. So, using this framework, we would need to have a baseline for normative, but We've just established that the research says there is no objective measure of documenting when orgasm is occurring in vulva owners, and there is no agreed upon subjective definition of orgasm. So, how can one be dysfunctional when there is no agreed upon definition of orgasm? Maybe I'm missing something, but for me, this portion of the definition is decidedly goal oriented without actually even naming a quantifiable goal. So basically, orgasms could be more intense, they could happen more quickly, and they could happen with more frequency, but no contextual naming of what any of this looks like from baseline to ideal. And then, of course, we have the media and messaging to fill in this gap with completely unrealistic and nearly humanly impossible images, which imply normative experiences. This often leads vulva owners feeling like they're missing out and that something within them needs to be fixed in order to attain this unnamed, unmeasurable normative orgasm. The next portion of the definition, absence of orgasm, is very specific. However, it's important to note that this assumes an orgasm imperative. And the orgasm imperative refers to the idea that people are always supposed to have an orgasm to complete or validate their sexual experiences. And the research suggests that fulfilling and satisfactory sex lives include a shift away from the focus on orgasm and sexual experience and towards a focus on pleasure, empathy, communication, embodiment, and present moment awareness. It also feels important to note that this orgasm imperative assumes orgasms are always good or ideal. This perspective erases the reality of people who experience orgasm as a result of sexual violence or just terrible sex, similar to the sexual encounter that Aziz Ansari had with a woman who goes by the name of Grace, in which she described the encounter as the quote worst night of her life. So, orgasm in and of itself should not be the primary goal of sexual experience. Focusing solely on orgasm makes vulva owners lose sight of all the other infinite possibilities that allow for more joy and more pleasure in their bodies within a sexual encounter. And so the last part of the definition for FOD that specifies the lack of orgasm must not be related to any other physical or relational problems. Um, that feels completely impossible to me. And I'd like us to take a moment to consider what problem could we meaningfully consider in general, but especially as it pertains to female orgasm that could exist outside of physical or relational context. And by relational, I'm taking this to mean the psychosocial context. I'm personally at a loss for imagining what that actually means. The definition alone feels like obfuscation and maybe even collective gaslighting for vulva owners by whoever created this definition. The definition itself can't be quantified, and it also must exist outside of relationships or biological connections. So, of course, you know, vulva owners may have orgasmic disorders due to any number of biological situations. They could be on medication. They could have had a surgery that prevents them from having a physical response. But I'm just trying to imagine what that would look like outside of either one of those factors. So this definition is very obtuse, and one would imagine that very few vulva owners are diagnosed with FOD. However, a quick Google search estimates that vulva owners are being diagnosed at rates anywhere from 4 to 34%. And for me, instead of diagnosis, I believe that we need a shift from the medicalization of female orgasmic experience and moving more towards a lens of sexual well-being. So, what is sexual well-being? The World Association for Sexual Health defines sexual health as a state of physical, emotional, mental, and social well-being in relation to sexuality. It involves the enhancement of love and personal relationships and is not merely the absence of disease, dysfunction, or infirmity. Sexual health requires a positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships, as well as the possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences free from coercion, discrimination, and violence. Sexual well being is one part of overall sexual health. And according to researcher Kristen Mitchell, sexual well being is often conflated within definitions of sexual health. And consequently, people have a tough time identifying and addressing everyday sexual issues. Mitchell says the absence of a sharp distinction between sexual well being and sexual health has created ambiguity. Instead, they offer a clear definition of sexual well being in the form of seven, quote, core domains of sexual well being, which include sexual safety and security, sexual respect, sexual self esteem, resilience in relation to past sexual experiences, forgiveness of past sexual events, self determination in one's sex life, and comfort with one's sexuality. Sexual well being supports and reinforces sexual pleasure. So let's take a look at how vulva owners could cultivate more sexual well being and increase their experience of pleasure. So, sexual safety and security is sometimes difficult to ascertain for anyone living under the cultural norms of a society informed by cis hetero patriarchal standards. In a safe sexual environment, people have the freedom to express their sexuality free from coercion. Consent is one area that remains elusive for many vulva owners. Due to power differentials and gendered social constructs, vulva owners are sometimes prevented from freely expressing continuous and affirmative consent. Research has shown that many people who have experienced sexual coercion define their experiences as consensual sexual encounters. Coercion has been connected to all sorts of negative sexual health outcomes, including poor relationship satisfaction and sexual functioning. So, educating and exposing vulva owners about the dynamic nature of consent is essential for sexual well being, especially if they're going to be able to get in touch with what they actually want and desire from a sexual experience. Sexual respect means one is heard by and understood by others when they voice their truth as it relates to their sexual personhood. So, consent comes up here again because sometimes vulva owners may, quote, consent to compliant sex to avoid unspoken and negative social consequences like receiving the cold shoulder from a partner. Many clinicians note that this kind of consent builds resentment rather than fulfilling sexual experiences. So, compliant sex undermines vulva owners' ability to receive sexual respect. Sexual self esteem helps vulva owners feel good about their bodies. And until very recently, this was certainly my experience, vulva owners did not see representations of the vulva and the clitoral complex printed in materials and in popular media. And even now, one might be hard pressed to find accurate representations of the unlimited multitude and sheer variety of vulvas that exists. In fact, no two are alike, and as many vulva owners are alive, are as many vulva owners that different types of vulvas that exist. So, because of this, vulva owners might have shame when it comes to how their vulva appears or looks because of the unrealistic representations in the media or just relative erasure around what vulvas actually look like. And so there was even one point in our history where Freud claimed that clitoral orgasm was immature as compared to vaginal orgasm. And although this myth has been debunked, vulva owners might still embrace the script of the coital imperative and feel that vaginal orgasms are somehow superior in some way, despite the fact that most women may not have access to them in their bodies. It's important for vulva owners to know their own bodies intimately so they can avoid chasing external authorities' ideas about what should feel good in their own bodies. So, this reminds me of the body sex course workshop that the late Betty Dodd, and invented, and but still goes on, where vulva owners get together and look at and send love to and encourage and really just normalize all the different types of vulvas that exist. And the class actually culminates with a group uh, masturbation experience where vulva owners can experience what pleasure, the varying ways that pleasure looks and feels like in not only their own bodies, but in other vulva owners' bodies. So, resilience in relationship to past experiences and forgiveness of past sexual experiences is also essential for vulva owners looking to gain greater access to a sense of sexual well being. The fact is that many vulva owners will be or have been violated by actual or attempted sexual assault. And this is kind of ubiquitous in our culture because, according to RAINN, every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. And this is a shocking number of people and highlights why it's so important for all people, including vulva owners, to have resources and safe spaces and communities so that we can get our needs met and be taken care of in the wake of violent encounters. The truth is, we live in a rape culture, and the potential for secondary violence, where institutions and family members may further violate victims by responding in ways that reinforce self blame and stigma, is prevalent. So, survivors must have access to people and places that will not make harm worse, but gently guide victims through the process of healing. Self determination helps vulva owners in feeling more choicefulness in deciding how, when, and if to engage with with potential sexual partners, free from pressure and coercion. Some vulva owners may carry hidden sexual scripts that dictate how individuals perceive their own desires and roles, as well as how they interpret and respond to their partner's behaviors. So, one example of a sexual script that vulva owners could carry is the so called dilemma of desire, where, on one hand, our culture, via media representations, encourages women to be sexy, but on the other hand, punishes women who show too much agency by being actively sexual. And it's important that vulva owners gain a sense of agency so they can decide how they want to be in relationship with their own sexuality. And sexual agency has actually been connected to more positive sexuality outcomes, such as more sexual satisfaction and even better sexual functioning. So, when vulva owners experience comfort within their sexuality, they feel free to explore and name their sexual identities and their desired experiences and pursue sexual pleasure. Entitlement is one way to enhance vulva owners' experience of self determination in their life. Entitlement to sexual pleasure refers to a person's sense that they deserve and have a right to what they feel and want sexually. And this reminds me of the seminal essay Uses of the Erotic by the uh, late, great Black lesbian feminist writer Audre Lorde, who says that women who have the courage to name and claim more erotic energy in their body possess power, and that power makes them give up being satisfied with the suffering, self negation, and numbness that seems like the only choice in our society. So, for Lord, women who possess this level of entitlement to their own pleasure have access to a power that is dangerous for the systems that profit off of vulva owners feeling confused and broken. So, embracing a framework of sexual well-being is a radical act that would make vulva owners the authors and the creators of their own sexual experiences. And when vulva owners have access to that level of power, it makes us less susceptible to external ideas of what we should and shouldn't be doing. We have space to step into the pleasure and the sexualities that affirm who we are and allow us to show up in ways that are in alignment with what we want to create in the world, right? So now that we see why we need to focus on sexual well being and pleasure and less on orgasm, let's have a musical reminder from the incomparable Kaya. She is a singer songwriter who reminds the listeners to let go of the coastal imperative and embrace more agency and entitlement by naming and sharing what vulva owners want in sexual experiences.
Shake your body, don't stop, don't miss, just do it. Do it, do it, do it, do it now. Lick it good, suck this pussy just like you should. Right now, lick it good, suck this pussy just like you should. My neck, my back, lick my pussy and my crack. My neck, my back, lick my pussy and my crack. My neck, my back, lick my pussy and my crack. Shake your body, don't stop, don't miss, just do it.
So thank
Do
you,
it,
Kaya, for
do
that
it, do
super
it now. Lick
catchy
it good,
and
suck this
memorable
pussy just like you
reminder.
should. Right
And
now, lick.
also, thank you for your time and attention. Just want to recognize that it is a valuable resource that is irreplaceable, and it really means a lot to me that you shared it with me today. And may you have ever increasing capacity for sexual well being and pleasure in all of your relationships.